Bonjour! This is our second attempt at a flipped classroom video for French 2. And today we're going to talk about les verbs that are à la page 238. Voilà, 238 dans votre livre. Page 238 dans votre livre. And again, this is new, so I'm just practicing using the whiteboards on the camera, using paper. We're going to see how this works. I've put this behind me. I don't know if you can see it, but that's just to let you know what date this is for and what we're supposed to be doing. So in case you just see the video and you want to have an idea what the video is about, that's what it is. Okay, the verbs and the vocabulary. The intention of these videos is to last hopefully less than 10 minutes. And you can get an overview of the notes. In today's case, that will be the verbs, and then also the vocabulary. And you can hear me pronounce them, pronounce the words. And your goal, whenever you finish one of these videos, is to understand the topic, which in this case is the verbs and vocabulary, to know how to pronounce the words. So with the video, you can go back and hear this again and again if you need to. Don't forget, ClassZone.com also has the vocabulary pronounced for you. And also, our goal is to not just know how to conjugate the verb, hear it, understand when you hear it, but also understand it when you hear it in a sentence. So at the end, if there's time, we'll practice a couple of sentences orally and then written out, just so you can hear the verbs in context. Okay, alors, allons-y. We're going to get started. The last lesson that we had was verbs like acheter, payer, and préférer. And those were regular verbs, but they had a spelling change, either an accent that switched, or you had to add an accent, or the Y changed to an I. But they were regular verbs. Today's verbs are not regular. They're irréguliers. Irréguliers. Irregular verbs, they don't follow a pattern. You just have to memorize them. And again, this is in your book on page 238. So you can either follow along in your book, copy it down. I encourage you to copy it down. We're going to start with the verb dire. Dire veut dire to say or to tell. And you hear this a lot in class because we have the expression, qu'est-ce que ça veut dire? Qu'est-ce que ça veut dire? And that means, what does it mean? Literally, we're saying, what does it want to say? But you've been hearing this expression for a long time, dire. The way you conjugate it is, we have our subjects, je dis, tu dis, il dit, nous disons, vous dites, ils disent. So it's an irregular verb, but we already start to notice some patterns. Remember how we usually have S, S, T, that's pretty common. ONS, that's very common for the new form, but this is pretty unusual. Usually the VU form has an EZ, but here it's an ES. So that's quite irregular. So I might, if I were you in my notes, I might circle this or highlight this or put a star next to it, because that one should stand out whenever you study the verb, that the VU form is bizarre, vous dites. And then ils disent with the ENT, and that's pretty familiar to us. We're used to ENTs with il. So je dis, tu dis, il dit, nous disons, vous dites, ils disent. Il dit, ils disent. And as we practice in class, you don't pronounce the ENT. Ils disent, and end it with the S sound. Okay, so some sentences you could make. Je dis la vérité. I tell the truth. Pinocchio, avec le long nez, il ne dit pas la vérité. He does not tell the truth. Est-ce que tu dis la vérité? Dis-moi, tell me, right? The verb dire. Those are some expressions with dire. The next verb that we have is lire. And lire means to read. So I've copied most of it out, but I didn't quite finish because you can go over the pattern with me. So lire, to read, je lis, and what ending do we always have? Je lis avec un S. Tu lis avec un S. Il lit avec un T. So that common pattern, S-S-T. Je lis, tu lis, il lit. I read, you read, he reads. Nous lisons. Vous lisez. So we go back to that EZ, our normal ending for vous. Ils lisent. E-N-T. Il lit, ils lisent. C'est bon? Alors, un exemple. Je lis un magazine. I read a magazine. Je lis le journal. Est-ce que tu lis le journal? Moi, j'adore lire le journal. I love to read the newspaper. D'accord? Je lis le journal. Bon, okay, so the verb lire. The last verb that we have is the verb écrire. Écrire veut dire to write. And you hear this in class all the time, right? Écris votre nom. Écrivez votre nom. Write your name. Écris la phrase. Write the sentence. So here we go. Écrire, to write. J'écris, and I left off the final letter so we can do that together. J'écris avec un S. Tu écris avec un S. Il écrit, oh, I already did that one. Il écrit avec un T. S-S-T. Nous écrit. Now this is kind of interesting. With the verb écrire, we're going to have a V. Where that V comes from, I don't know, but it's there. Écrivons. ONS ending. Vous écrivez. And ils écrivent. Voilà. Il écrit. Ils écrivent. And remember, with verbs that start with vowels, you want to be sure you connect that sound. Nous écrivons, vous écrivez, ils écrivent. C'est bon? Et voilà. So those are our three verbs, écrire, lire, and dire. Now these are the present tense. I write, you write, I am writing, you are writing. This is present. But every time you learn a verb, we always need to know what it is in the past tense as well, now that we've learned the passé composé. So when you do the passé composé, remember how to form it. That would be avoir plus le participe passé. So these are irregular verbs, so they're going to have irregular past participles. Les participes passés irréguliers. Dire, dit, lire, lu, écrire, écrit. So this is kind of meaningless. This is just a word. Now let's see what it looks like in a full phrase. So if I wanted to say, I said yes, for example. Je, then avoir, j'ai, past participle, dit. J'ai dit, I said. J'ai dit que oui, I said yes. With the verb lire, if I want to say you read the newspaper. Tu, need avoir, tu as, past participle, lu. Tu as lu le journal. You read the newspaper. Et puis finalement, le verbe écrire, we wrote emails this weekend. Nous. And then you remember avoir with nous. Nous avons. Not sure if I'm going to have room for this. Nous avons écrit. Okay, so passé composé, you always need avoir, and then here are our new past participles. Okay, so we have the present of the verb, which you have to memorize the whole thing, and then you have the past participle, where you just really have to memorize the past participle because you already know the forms of avoir. Okay, so those are our three new verbs, and then we need vocabulary so we can use them. And the vocabulary à la page 239, page 239, we have things that you read, things that you say, things that you write. So I'm just going to follow in the book, and I'm going to pronounce them, and you can practice pronouncing them after me if you'd like. On lit un journal. Journaux is the plural, les journaux. Un magazine. Notice that un magasin is a store. Un magazine, like you have in your book, is a magazine. Un roman, une bande dessinée, une histoire, une revue. On écrit un mail, un journal, un poème, une carte postale, une lettre. On dit un mensonge, on dit la vérité. And then it tells you that there are two words for to tell in French, the verb dire that we practiced, and also the verb raconter, which means to like tell a story, to recount what happened. So raconter is another way to say to tell, but we're going to be practicing the verb dire. Okay, let's practice the vocabulary on page 239 a little bit more and see if you can hear and understand the word I say. So if I were to say une histoire, that would be a story. How about un roman? Un roman, a novel. La vérité, truth. Voilà, truth. Bon. Okay, now let's practice, because a lot of students say they have a hard time with listening. So we're going to try to give a little opportunity to hear the vocabulary of the verb. So I'm going to read two questions and see if you can think about what the question is asking, or better yet, can you answer the question in French in a complete sentence. So here's the first question. Est-ce que tu écris avec un crayon ou un stylo? Est-ce que tu écris avec un crayon ou un stylo? Est-ce que tu écris avec un crayon ou un stylo? Je n'ai pas ni de crayon ni de stylo, mais voilà. Mais avec quoi est-ce que tu écris? Alors, moi, j'écris avec un marqueur. Oui, c'est un marqueur. Ce n'est pas un crayon, ce n'est pas un stylo. So the question was asking, do you write with a pen or pencil? So your answer would have been, j'écris avec un stylo, or crayon. Ok, alors la deuxième question. Pourquoi est-ce que tu lis les bandes dessinées? Pourquoi est-ce que tu lis les bandes dessinées? So I was asking, why, pourquoi, do you read comic strips? And an answer could be, je lis les bandes dessinées parce que elles sont amusantes. Elles sont comiques. Something like that. They're fun. They're funny. Voilà. Okay, last thing we're going to do is I'm going to read a sentence, and your goal is to try to write out what I say. This is called a dictée. Okay, so here we go. Mes amis disent que le croque-monsieur est un plat français. So you're going to try to write out in French what you hear. Mes amis disent que le croque-monsieur est un plat français. And you can put it on pause if you need to pause it. Mes amis disent que le croque-monsieur est un plat français. So again, you can pause it if you need to, and I'm going to write out what you heard. Mes amis disent que le croque-monsieur est un plat français. Voilà. How'd you do? Ok, alors la deuxième phrase. J'écris une lettre à ma grand-mère. J'écris une lettre à ma grand-mère. And again, you can pause it. So here I go with the answer. J'écris une lettre à ma grand-mère. Voilà. Bon. I read a letter, or I write a letter to my grandmother. Bon. All right, so now, voilà, c'est fini. So your goal when you come to class on Monday or Tuesday is that you can conjugate, lire, dire, écrire You know what they mean, you can use them in a sentence, and you can recognize the vocabulary à la page 239. You understand how to pronounce them, and then you can understand them and recognize them when they're used in a sentence. Alors, au revoir, bon week-end.